Welcome. Today we are focusing our attention on a specific cultural phenomenon that really exploded out of Hollywood, California back in 1981.
We're looking at Mötley Crüe.
Exactly. And this is a group that you could argue really defined the entire aesthetic and sound of that glam metal era.
For sure. But if you look past the hairspray and the leather, the story you find is it's surprisingly complex.
It really is. It seems to be a story defined by a very, very sharp contradiction.
It is. I mean, on the surface, you have this reputation that's built on absolute chaos.
Right. Hedonism, legal troubles, substance abuse, all the internal feuds.
All of that. But underneath all of that noise, you have this relentless survival instinct and a series of really calculated business decisions that have let them outlast almost all of their contemporaries.
And that's really the angle we want to explore here today. We aren't just looking at the music, but at the machinery behind it.
The whole operation.
Yeah, we're going to trace their history from, the very first rehearsal in 1981 all the way through to what they've been doing in late 2024 and even looking ahead into 2025.
And the scale of this entity, it's significant. We're talking about over 100 million records sold worldwide.
That's a staggering number.
It is.
Yeah.
And they have 7 platinum or multi-platinum certifications. But the key is how they manage to commodify their own notoriety. That's something very few artists have ever done successfully.
We should probably clarify our approach here. We're going to stick strictly to the factual history.
Right.
We want to analyze the events, the dates, the documented actions, and the legal filings. We want to understand how a band that, by all accounts, seemed destined to self-destruct somehow managed to survive.
Survive the grunge era, multiple lineup changes.
And even their own retirement.
It's a fascinating story of resilience, and it really begins with the formation.
Yeah.
The nucleus of the band, it didn't actually start with the 4 members that we all know.
No, it started earlier, in early 1981 with the drummer Tommy Lee and a guitarist named Greg Leon.
And this detail often gets lost in the official mythology of the band.
And Greg Leon wasn't just some amateur. He had a real pedigree. He'd been in a band called Sweet 19. He'd played with Quiet Riot, with Dawkins.
The serious musician. So he and Tommy Lee were trying to get something started, and they went to see a farewell show for a local band called London.
And playing bass for London that night was Nikki Sixx.
Right. And this moment is absolutely crucial for the band's identity. Tommy Lee was immediately captivated by Sixx, but it wasn't necessarily because of his musical talent.
It was the image.
He was the image. Lee apparently already had posters of London on his wall just because he liked their look, the whole aesthetic.
But then they actually got into a room to play together, and there was immediate friction.
A lot of friction.
Yeah.
Greg Leon was a technical musician. He cared about the execution. And when Sixx came in to audition, Leon was, to put it mildly, unimpressed with his ability to play the bass.
He's on record about that, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. He's on record saying that while Sixx looked great and had this amazing stage presence, he just couldn't play.
And this is where that fundamental split happens, right?
Yeah.
The choice between technical skill and something else.
Exactly. This is where the divergence happens. Greg Leon prioritized the musical execution. Tommy Lee, on the other hand, prioritized what he called the visual mesh.
The attitude, the style, the potential for a spectacle.
That's it. Lee sided with the image over the musicianship.
And that one decision effectively pushed Greg Leon out.
He quit. He realized he just wasn't on the same page, which left Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx to build the rest of the lineup from scratch.
So they needed a guitarist who fit this very specific image-focused vision. So they placed an advertisement in the recycler.
And the wording of that ad is now, it's famous in rock history. It didn't ask for a virtuoso or a session player.
No.
It read, loud, rude, and aggressive guitar player available.
That ad was placed by a man named Bob Deal, who pretty quickly changed his name to Mick Mars.
Right. And when Mars came to audition, the chemistry was totally different. It wasn't about being technically perfect. It was about having a certain kind of sound, a certain kind of energy.
And there's an interesting detail there, too. There was another guitarist there that day, a guy named Robin Moore.
And he was fired on the spot during the session just to make room for Mars.
So now they have the rhythm section and the lead guitar. They just need a frontman.
And Tommy Lee had a connection from his high school days. Charter Oak High School in Covina. He knew a guy named Vince Neil.
They'd played together before on the garage band circuit.
They had. At the time, Neil was singing for a band called Rock Candy.
But Vince Neil wasn't interested at first. He actually turned them down.
He did. He refused the offer to audition. It was only when his own band, Rock Candy, started started shifting their musical direction toward new wave that he reconsidered.
He didn't want to play new wave.
He wanted to play rock. So on April 1st, 1981, he was officially hired.
So now they had the four members. They had the personnel, but they needed a name. And this is where you see just how different their initial ideas were.
Vince Neil had a suggestion that, looking back now, it feels completely out of place with the band they became.
He suggested Christmas.
Can you imagine the band Christmas?
It's hard to picture a band with their reputation performing under that name. The idea was rejected immediately, of course.
Of course. It was Mick Mars who provided the alternative. He remembered a comment from a former bandmate in his old group, White Horse. The guy had called them a motley-looking crew.
And Mars had written it down.
Yeah, on a scrap of paper as Mötley Crüe. They decided to adopt it, and then Vince Neil suggested adding the metal ups.
The two dots over the O and the U.
Right. And the inspiration for that allegedly came from the Lowenbro beer they were all drinking at the time.
So by April of 1981, the brand, the identity, was basically established, and they wasted no time at all.
No, they found a manager, Alan Kaufman, and they immediately founded their own independent label, Leather Records.
And their debut album, Too Fast for Love, came out that same year, in November 1981.
That independent release got them noticed. By early 1982, they were signed to a major label, Elektra Records.
But the real story of 1982 isn't the contract itself, it's the tour that followed. The Cruising Through Canada Tour 82.
If you really want to understand how this band operated, you have to look at this tour. It was a complete financial disaster.
A total mess.
But it established their reputation for notoriety. It was just a series of escalating incidents, one after the other.
It started literally the second they got off the plane.
At the airport, yes. They were arrested at Edmonton International Airport because they were wearing their stage gear. They had these spiked wardrobe items that customs officials considered to be dangerous weapons.
And that wasn't all. They also found Vince Neil carrying a bag full of pornographic magazines,
which they charged as bringing indecent material into the country.
So that was just their arrival. Later on, during a show at a place called Scandals Disco in Edmonton, a bomb threat was called in. The entire building had to be evacuated.
But here's the twist. The bomb threat was a total fabrication. The research indicates it was a staged PR stunt.
Orchestrated by their own team.
By their assistant manager, Eric Grief. The whole goal was just to get the band's name on the front page of the Edmonton Journal. They were manufacturing their own controversy from day one.
The chaos just continued at the hotel.
It did. Tommy Lee famously threw a television set out of the window from an upper story of the Sheraton Caravan Hotel.
And the cumulative effect of all of this.
The band was banned for life from the city of Edmonton.
So they went back to Los Angeles, completely broke.
Utterly broke. But they had generated massive international press coverage. They had successfully branded themselves as dangerous. And that attracted the attention of some heavyweight managers in 1983, Doug Thaler and Doc McGee.
And this really ushers in their breakthrough era. In May of '83, they played the U.S. Festival,
which put them in front of hundreds of thousands of people, a huge platform.
And then in September, they released Shout at the Devil.
And this album changed everything. It was eventually certified 4X Platinum, but consistent with their strategy, it courted controversy.
The imagery, the title.
It drew the ire of conservative Christian groups who accused the band of promoting Satanism.
That kind of moral panic only helps sell more records, though.
It sold more records. And it also got the attention of Ozzy Osbourne, who took them out as the support act for his tour in 1984. They were on this upward trajectory that seemed absolutely unstoppable.
But in December of 1984, reality. Well, it crashed in. We have to discuss the vehicular manslaughter incident.
This is a very grave moment in the timeline. On December 8th, 1984, Vince Neil was driving to a liquor store in his De Tomaso Pantera.
And he had a passenger with him.
He did. Nicholas Razzle Dingley, who was the drummer for the Finnish band Hanoi Rocks.
And Neil lost control of the car.
He lost control and crashed. Razzle was killed in the accident.
The legal consequences were immediate. Neil was charged with DUI and vehicular manslaughter.
And he was sentenced to 30 days in jail.
But he served even less than that.
He only served 18 days for good behavior. He was also ordered to pay $2.5 million in civil settlements to the victims' families.
It was a tragedy that, it arguably should have ended the band, or at least Neil's career.
It should have. But instead, the band just kept going. They went right back into the studio to record Theater of Pain, which was released in 1985.
And when they dedicated the album to Razzle.
They did, and this record marked a real shift in their sound. It was much more polished, heading straight into that glam metal style.
Commercially, it was a success. The album hit number 6 on the charts.
It worked on the charts, yes. But internally, the band was it was falling apart. The guilt from the accident was hanging over Vince Neil, and Nikki Sixx was descending into a very severe heroin addiction.
And that addiction produced some of the darkest lore surrounding the group. There are 2 specific overdose incidents involving Sixx that are part of the historical record.
The first one happened in London in 1986. Sixx overdosed at a dealer's house. The dealer, thinking Sixx was dead and, fearing the police, reportedly dumped his body in a dumpster.
And Sixx just woke up later.
Woke up later and climbed out.
The second incident was even more severe.
It was. This was December 23rd, 1987. Sixx overdosed again. This time, he was declared clinically dead for 2 minutes.
But one of the paramedics in the ambulance
Happened to be a Mötley Crüe fan, and he allegedly administered 2 shots of adrenaline directly into Sixx's chest to revive him.
That event didn't just become a story, it became a song.
Kickstart My Heart, which became one of their absolute biggest hits, was written about that very overdose. But before that song came out, they released the album Girls, Girls, Girls in 1987.
This one moved away from the glam look a bit. It adopted more of a gritty biker aesthetic.
It did, and it debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. Nikki Sixx has always claimed it would have been number 1 if Whitney Houston's label hadn't manipulated the release schedules.
But he's also admitted the album itself wasn't their best work.
No, he said they were all just so heavily intoxicated during the recording process that it just wasn't their creative peak.
It sounds like it all reached a breaking point in 1988.
It did. Their managers, Thaler and McGee, they looked at the state of the band and they realized these guys were going to die if they kept touring.
So they canceled a planned European tour.
A massive loss of revenue, but they do it because they genuinely feared that the members would come back in body bags.
They staged an intervention.
They did, and for the first time, all 4 members of the band entered drug rehabilitation. They got sober.
And that sobriety, it yielded results.
Absolutely. They went to Vancouver to record with the producer Bob Brock. And Bob Rock, he knew how volatile the group was, so he implemented a very strict schedule.
He had them record their parts separately.
Yes, to minimize the time they spent in the same room together, he wanted to reduce the infighting.
And the result of that process was Dr. Feelgood, released in 1989.
It was their first and only number 1 album. It stayed on the charts for 114 weeks. And the band members themselves, they often cite this as their musical peak.
And they directly attribute the quality of the performances to the fact that they were sober.
To the fact that they were lucid, yes. So they ended the 1980s right on top of the world. But the 1990s, that presented a completely different challenge.
The entire musical landscape shifted violently with the arrival of grunge and alternative rock.
And right as that external pressure was hitting them, the internal cohesion just failed.
Yeah.
In February of 1992, Vince Neil left the band.
And the story of why he left differs.
It does. It depends on who you ask. Nikki Sixx says Neil quit. Vince Neil says he was fired. But the result was the same. The voice of the band was gone.
So they hired a new singer, John Corabi. He'd been the singer for a band called The Scream.
And they released a self-titled album with Corabi in 1994. From a critical standpoint, looking back, many people argue the music was actually quite strong.
It was heavier, more serious.
It was, but the fan base, they rejected it completely.
It reached the Billboard Top 10 initially, but then it just plummeted. It was a commercial failure, especially compared to their previous multi-platinum heights.
Fans just wanted Vince Neil.
So the label eventually forced the issue.
They did. John Corabi was fired in 1996, and Vince Neil was brought back into the fold.
And they released Generation Swine in 1997. But it seemed like the magic wasn't quite there. The album struggled.
It did. However, right around this time, in 1998, the band made a business move, that is. Well, it's perhaps the single most important decision in their entire career. Their contract with Elektra Records was expiring.
And usually in that situation, the record label keeps the master recordings forever. That's the standard industry practice. The artist gets royalties, but the label owns the tapes.
Mötley Crüe wanted their masters back. and they used their reputation to get them.
How so?
The report suggests they made themselves so incredibly difficult to deal with, so toxic to the corporate environment, that Elektra just wanted to be rid of them.
So the label basically handed over the rights to their entire back catalog just to wash their hands of the band.
That's the story. And it meant the band now owned Dr. Feelgood, Shout at the Devil, Kickstart My Heart, everything. They created their own label, Mötley Records.
And that secured their financial independence, regardless of whether they ever had another hit song.
It was an absolutely brilliant move, but the interpersonal drama, of course, didn't stop. In 1999, Tommy Lee quit.
He had gotten into a physical altercation with Vince Neil.
He had. And he also wanted to pursue a solo career with his rap metal project, Methods of Mayhem.
The band tried to continue without him. They hired Randy Castillo, the former drummer for Ozzy Osbourne.
And they recorded the album New Tattoo in 2000, but then tragedy struck again. Randy Castillo fell ill and died of cancer in 2002.
So the band essentially went on hiatus. They were, musically irrelevant to the mainstream at this point.
They were, but then they pivoted to a different medium entirely. In 2001, they released their autobiography, The Dirt.
And that this book was a phenomenon, co-authored with Neil Strauss. It didn't try to hide any of the bad behavior. It amplified it.
It framed them as the world's most notorious rock band, and it became a New York Times bestseller.
So The Dirt basically kept the brand alive while the music was dormant.
Exactly. It allowed a whole new generation of fans to discover the story, and it perfectly set the stage for the reunion.
Which happened in 2004. The original 4 members, Six, Neil, Mars, and Lee, announced they were getting back together.
And they did it in typical Mötley Crüe fashion, arriving at the press conference in a hearse.
They released a compilation album, Red, White, and Crüe, which went platinum. They were back in arenas.
And they followed this up in 2008 with a new studio album, Saints of Los Angeles, which was loosely based on the stories in The Dirt.
And it was successful. It gave them their first #1 rock song on iTunes.
It was, but by 2014, they decided it was time to end it. For good, they said. They announced the final tour.
And they went to great lengths to convince the public that this was real.
Oh, they did. They signed a cessation of touring agreement at a big press conference. They claimed this legal document physically prevented them from ever touring under the name Mötley Crüe after the year 2015.
They played their final show on New Year's Eve 2015 at the Staples Center in Los Angeles.
It ended with Tommy Lee's drum kit getting stuck upside down on his roller coaster track. It really felt definitive.
And for a few years, they stayed retired. But the brand continued to grow. In March of 2019, the film adaptation of The Dirt was released on Netflix.
And the movie was a massive hit for the streaming service. It introduced the band to millions of people who weren't even born when Shout at the Devil came out.
Streaming numbers for their old songs just skyrocketed.
The demand for them to play live returned, and it was bigger than ever.
And suddenly, that cessation of touring agreement didn't seem quite so legally binding anymore.
Not at all. In November 2019, reports of a reunion tour surfaced. The band then confirmed it by posting a video showing the contract literally being blown up.
And they revealed the loophole.
The loophole was that if all 4 original members agreed to tour, they could override the contract they had all signed.
So they announced the stadium tour, co-headlining with Def Leppard. It was delayed by the global pandemic, but it finally launched in the summer of 2022. And it was a massive commercial success.
It was huge. However, that reunion came with a major casualty. In October of 2022, Mick Mars announced he was retiring from touring.
And we need to be really specific about why. Mars has battled ankylosing spondylitis since he was a teenager.
It's a degenerative form of spinal arthritis. It's incredibly painful, and it fuses the vertebrae together. He stated that he simply could not handle the physical demands of travel anymore.
So the band announced that John Five, a very well-known guitarist from his work with Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson, would take Mars's place on the road.
And initially it seemed like a respectful, amicable transition, but that illusion was completely shattered in April of 2023.
Mick Mars sued the band. And this wasn't just a minor dispute. This is a full-blown legal war.
It was. Mars alleged that the band was trying to remove him completely from the corporation. He claimed they had cut his touring royalties from 25% down to just 5%.
And his argument was that he only retired from touring, not from being a member of the band.
Exactly. He argued he should still be paid his full share of the business. The lawsuit also contained some pretty serious accusations of gaslighting.
Mars claimed the other members kept telling him he was losing his cognitive abilities, that he couldn't remember the chords, that his playing was bad.
And Mars countered this by alleging that he was the only one actually playing his instrument live. He accused Nikki Sixx, Vince Neil, and Tommy Lee of relying heavily on backing tracks during that stadium tour.
So how did the band respond to this?
They fired back hard. They denied firing him, but they cited a 2008 agreement that all members had signed.
What did that agreement say?
It stated that if a member resigns from touring, they lose their rights to live performance royalties. So they argued Mars had, in effect, resigned, and they vehemently denied the backing track accusations.
Nikki Sixx made some public statements about it.
He did. He said he loved Mick, but that Mick was confused and being manipulated by his legal team. As of mid-2023, Mick Mars has stated he intends to never speak to the other band members again.
Despite all that legal turmoil, the band continued with John 5, making him a permanent member.
They did. And in April 2024, they signed a new record deal with Big Machine Records.
Which showed they were still looking to create new music.
Yes. They released a single called Dogs of War, which was the first track to feature John 5. Then, in October of 2024, they released an EP titled Cancelled.
And that EP includes a cover of the Beastie Boys song, You Gotta Fight for Your Right to Party, which feels like a statement in itself.
It does. It serves as a statement that they are still here, still making noise.
And looking ahead, they've announced a residency in Las Vegas for 2025.
Vince Neil has said in interviews that they probably won't make full albums anymore, but that they will continue to release new songs and tour until they physically cannot do it.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, we should probably address the conflicts they've had with other bands. The history of Mötley Crüe is also a history of public feuds.
It really is. One of the most prominent is with Metallica. And this goes way back to the early 80s.
Right. Lars Ulrich of Metallica admitted to screaming insults at them on the street in 1982.
And then years later, in 1997, Ulrich accused them of using backing tracks at the American Music Awards.
Sixx responded by trashing Metallica's albums from that era.
He did. But that feud seems to have been resolved now. James Hetfield has been on Sixx's radio show, and Sixx has praised Metallica's longevity in recent years.
The feud with Guns N' Roses was, a bit more physical.
A lot more physical. In 1988, Izzy Stradlin of Guns N' Roses allegedly assaulted Vince Neil's wife at a club.
So in retaliation, Vince Neil punched Stradlin in the face during the 1989 MTV Video Music Awards.
That then led to Axl Rose publicly challenging Vince Neil to a fight. Neil accepted, proposed holding it in Atlantic City, but the fight never actually happened.
There was also a more recent conflict with the band Godsmack.
Yes, during the Crüe Fest 2 tour in 2009, Godsmack's singer, Sully Erna, claimed that Mötley Crüe treated all the support acts with a lot of disrespect.
And he later wrote a song, Crying Like a Bitch.
Which was widely rumored to be about Nikki Sixx.
And finally, there's the issue with Steel Panther.
This is a really interesting one. Steel Panther started as a parody of the whole glam era. But Michael Starr, their singer, made a joke in an interview about bringing Vince Neil back from the dead, implying that the current Vince Neil was terrible.
And Nikki Sixx did not take kindly to that.
No. He took great offense to it and has refused to associate with them ever since. It creates this very strange dynamic where the originators of a genre are essentially at war with the satirists of that same genre.
We also just need to touch on the theatrical element. Mötley Crüe was never just about the audio.
No, the live show was absolutely integral. They developed these theatrics that became industry standards for big metal shows.
You had Nikki Sixx's flamethrower bass guitar.
You had pyrotechnics that involved literally setting the bassist on fire. And of course you had Tommy Lee's drum solos.
The drum solos became their own separate event within the show.
They did. First, the kit would just tilt forward. Then, in later tours, the entire drum kit would rotate 360 degrees vertically. And finally, you had the Crucifly roller coaster.
Where the entire drum kit traveled on tracks suspended above the audience.
It was pure spectacle. And those spectacles, combined with the music, are why they are consistently ranked by outlets like VH1 and Loudwire as one of the top heavy metal acts at all time.
So when we look at the full picture, from 1981 all the way to their plans for 2025, what do we actually see?
I think we see a case study in survival. Pure and simple. This is a band that navigated severe addiction, the death of a founding member, prison time, changing musical trends that wiped out almost all of their peers, and these vicious internal legal battles.
They really did successfully transition from being just a band to being a brand?
Absolutely. They sell the story, the books, the movies, the merchandise just as much, if not more, than they sell the music itself.
And the fact that they can publicly sign a final contract, tear it up a few years later, and then book a residency in Las Vegas.
It just demonstrates that as long as there is an audience willing to buy the ticket, Mötley Crüe will find a way to sell it.
It's a complicated legacy, but one that is undeniably enduring.
It absolutely is.
Thanks for listening.